So welcome all to the next session of this Africa e-mobility week. And our next session will be on standards as a tool for safety and quality in Africa's EV transition. I think standards play such a critical role in ensuring that we guarantee proper safety as well as quality for the end users. We're in a really critical moment given the challenges around climate change and this need for utilizing the renewable energy resources that we have on the continent. So the conversation will be steered by our able moderator, Ms. Catherine Nyambala. I'll hand it over to her, but before I do that, I'd still like to pass a big thank you to all of you who have managed to log on to the session. This session will take exactly 1 hour, and over to you, Catherine.
Warren, it looks like I have been moderating so many events. Today I'm not the moderator. Today I'm one of the speakers.
Oh, sorry.
Warren, it's Robert, the moderator.
Robert, sorry. That's good. It's been a while, Catherine, so I was excited to see you. Okay, go ahead, Robert, and good to see you, Nico, as well.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I think for a while there you had demoted me from my work today. So I was a bit surprised because I was wondering now. Anyway. It's good for to moderate this session. My name is Robert.
Don't blame him, Robert. I moderate a lot, so don't blame him.
Familiar face, huh? Yeah, my name is Robert Njoroge from the Kenya Bureau of Standards. Basically, I'm the technical committee manager for the Electric Mobility Technical Committee. Which is the National Committee for Kenya on E-Mobility. So I will be moderating this session, and thank you for our presenters, our panelists for joining this session. So I think we'll do a small brief introduction by our panelists, just to describe what your company or what you are engaged in matters e-mobility, whether standards play any role in the development of the products that you're involved in, or rather the service. So I think we can start with you, Nico, from Grotri.
Thanks, Robert. So we are an e-mobility company based in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. We started with electric three-wheelers, so tuk-tuks or bajajis, as you will. And so why do we believe standards are important? It's very simple, right? First of all, we are putting moving assets on the streets, which are being driven and are meant for transporting people, right? So there needs to be a standard to make sure that these assets are actually safe to be operated on the roads. Second of all, these assets are electric, so they come with batteries. So these batteries need to clearly be, easy to handle and need to be safe. Having said that, we need to make sure that they don't, catch fire, they don't explode. And it's not only battery, but only the chargers that we're using for that. And that's pretty much where we understand that, standards and regulations are important. Opposed to the general thinking for startups who say, hey, the least regulations, the better. In our case, an asset-heavy business with a use case where we all not only impacting our customers' lives, but other lives as well. Standards and regulations are in fact needed.
Thank you for that, Nico. I think that's a good point, especially when we're talking about batteries. And it's good also to share what work is being done over in Tanzania for our other African partners to kind of also appreciate what is happening. So over to you, Engineer Nyambala.
Thank you, Robert. My name is Engineer Catherine Nyambala, currently engaged at Kengen PLC, and I'm also a member of the Women in Sustainable Energy, Entrepreneurship and Energy. We have a partnership with the Association of EV. Today I'm talking as myself. I'm not representing Kengen in this meeting. Now, standards are very, very important, both to quality and to safety. And why are standards important? One, we are dealing with power. anytime you're dealing with power, you have to ensure that people are safe, and for that you have to have standards for deployment. 2, you want to be able to operate the different infrastructure, interoperability, that's what you call it. And for that, you have to have standards to allow for interoperability. And then we're talking about the tariff for the power. For that reason, once you have standards and you can interoperate, then you can have optimal costs. We don't want tariffs that are going to make people cry the way we have expensive petrol. You want to organize the infrastructure in a manner that you have least cost on the power. And then when you have all this, you will have convenience for your customers. And then very quickly, let me say, when we talk about standards, we also talk about the protocols that will be used. And for that, standards and protocols, you're talking about standards for the installers, standards for hybrid stations where you're going to have fuel still together with power as a source. You have to have the standards for infrastructure, which I've already spoken about. You have to ensure that the car standards are up to the mark. Nico has already spoke about batteries. And then lastly, your charge points need to be universal. Somebody needs to be able to access any charge point all the way to being built, dealing with multi-currencies and ensuring that you can work across countries if you're roaming. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you so much, Engineer. I think that's a very great point that you've raised there about the interoperability of the charging infrastructure. I think that is one issue that we're seeing all over the world that is kind of hindering the growth of this sector. But I think from your explanation, we can see how standards can be able to address that. Now over to you, Gilbert. Do you have Gilbert?
Hi, Robert.
Hi, Gilbert.
Hi, my name is Gilbert Minja, and I work with eMotion Africa in Arusha, Tanzania. So what we deal with at eMotion Africa is retrofitting. That is, we convert the existing fuel vehicles, the four-wheelers, into electric vehicles. This is where we have started with. We're in Arusha, so we have a flagship product that is the 4x4 safari vehicles that are operating in the national parks. But we also have a roadmap that we are going to move on into rapid bus transit, transport, and three-wheelers and two-wheelers. But right now we are working on the e-safari vehicles. So I believe that as far as the standards are concerned, I really believe that we need to make sure that users have access to transparent and reliable information about the EVs themselves, charging stations, and also the pricing. And this is not only on the national level; it should be across the region. That is East Africa. It should be across the region as Africa as a whole. But also, because we are dealing with retrofitting. Retrofitting is we source around components that have the right standards, but the components that would actually mimic what a normal electric, a normal fuel vehicle would behave. Then these components have to be. We have to make sure that they are of high quality. They are of high quality because, as Nico mentioned, electric vehicles are critical when it comes to catching fire and so forth. So companies that are going to also come into this area where they want to retrofit, existing vehicles, then we have to make sure that all the components conforms to the quality and the standards that the EV industry would actually have actually set aside. And lastly, Engineer Nyambala mentioned it. We need to have common technical standards across the region. What we are doing right now, we are converting vehicles in Tanzania with Tanzanian standards. with TBS and so forth, these are acceptable here. But are they acceptable in Kenya? Are they acceptable in Rwanda? As a region, as EAC, for instance, for East African community, we need common technical standards across the region so that we can also do business with the rest of East Africa countries. This is as far as interoperability of the EVs themselves and the charging stations are concerned. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gilbert. I think you've touched on two great points. One of them being quality. You cannot divorce the word quality from standards, as well as information, access to information. I think during this whole conversation of the Africa E-Mobility Week, that is one area where we are trying to give this information out to the public. So thank you for that. Then I'll move over to Michelle Arwa from CFAO. Michelle? Michelle, are you with us?
Michelle, can you try unmuting yourself? She is in the room.
Okay.
I see he says it's not working. Maybe we can proceed, and Michelle, you can try rejoining just to make it
easier. Okay, that's okay. I think we'll move on to now the next part. Now at least we've known our panelists. Once Michelle is brought back on, she'll introduce herself and just give us a brief of what they are working on. And also, I think Gilbert, could you kindly put your camera on? Because this first question is to you. We'd like to know more about Tanzania. So basically, standards are believed to break technical barriers to trade. That is, it's believed that they facilitate trade, or rather, we know that. But sometimes it seems that standards can slow down regional trade in that before getting into these agreements, it takes a bit of time. And we know at that time, the world keeps moving and innovation. So from your point of view, Gilbert, you could tell us whether there's a need for e-mobility regional standards, especially for Africa, to promote the quality of products being traded in the region, or whether each country should actually have its own standard. I believe you had started touching on that point. Maybe you could continue from where you had left off. Gilbert.
Yes. Thank you, Robert. That's a very nice question. What we did as eMotion, first of all, we wanted a proof of concept. We went forward with the retrofitting idea to gain a proof of concept that this is actually working right now. And once it worked, then we invited over a body of standards, because in the country so far there were no standards that were put aside. So believing that they would also want to learn from us, they would also want to learn from how did we start, how did we manage to procure all the components that we have right now, from where did we procure these components. So we shared each and every detail of what we had in hand. And we did this so that we help the body of standards, to put down the standards and regulations that would actually be friendlier to other operators that are coming inside the industry. This industry, I believe, it's within an infant stage. It's a growing industry, but in our region, in our countries, it's still very immature industry. So the government or the policymakers or the bodies that are responsible for creating these standards have to invite over key players in the region, like eMotion Africa or Try, invite them on the table and help to, they will help to create these standards with you. I believe I've answered that question.
Yeah, thank you, Gilbert. Yeah, I think it is good once we have different companies sitting on one table and kind of discussing what they're doing. And I think from the attendees, I saw we have participation from representative from Rome, previously OPBUS. I hope, because I've noticed that you guys kind of do similar work, you can be able to coordinate and have a discussion. But now looking at the bigger picture, I think from what I've gotten from you in terms of standards, I think it would be good if these standards bodies from different parts of the African region can sit down and now have that conversation on behalf of these companies. So thank you for that. I've seen also Michelle Arwa from CFAO has joined. So Michelle, do I repeat the question or you had it, the first one?
You can repeat the first question.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was just give us a brief description of what your company is involved in matters e-mobility and whether standards play any role in that, in your day-to-day workings in terms of e-mobility.
All right, thank you, Robert. And my name is Michelle Arwa from CFAO Kenya, and I'm part of the Energy and Technology Department, where we carry out research and investigation on energy sources and possible transition to better green solutions for mobility. And one of the, obviously, we believe that creating standards will enhance the ecosystem of e-mobility in Africa, from the battery to the charging infrastructure to the power source, and even at the end of the life of this battery into the disposal. So what does this have on the environment? What impact does it create? And even to the people around. So it's very necessary and important that we have guidelines that govern this whole ecosystem. And I believe it can enhance our movement into the EV transition as Africa and even as individual countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I think that's a good explanation as to how standards affect the whole ecosystem in terms of e-mobility. And now I think I'd like also to move back to you, Engineer Catherine, as an energy expert. I know you've seen, given that you represent an institution which has set up, and we've heard of other institutions in Africa, in Kenya, that want to install charging infrastructure and have already installed charging infrastructure. So you could briefly tell us how electric mobility standards can promote safety to the EV users through now such products or services that are being offered in terms of charging infrastructure. When we discuss safety, how do we marry standards, safety, and charging? Welcome.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, now let's get into it. And the first one is regarding the infrastructure itself. As we have already mentioned, we are dealing with power, and you have to have adequate power. And anytime you have power, you must have your protection devices, your fuses and other circuit breakers and other such. And so we are starting with you have to have enough standards for the kind of cabling that you're going to have, linking to the amount of power that you're going to be drawing. And so for that, you have your standard electrical safety standards. You have your standard protection devices standards, and then you have standards to ensure power adequacy. If you have 6 charge points and you're expecting to have a super fast charger, how much power are you going to draw? And therefore, what standards do you have to put in place to ensure it's adequate? From there, we go on to the future. What kind of allowance do you need to give? You need to have standards around that. And then energy metering, because now you're going to be metering this, you have to have those standards. At some point, we are going to be having vehicle to grid, or some countries will have vehicle to grid if we have that kind of regulations. Again, you need standards around that. And finally, on infrastructure, we already spoke about interoperability. You don't want to reach, for the people who are here in Nairobi, Naivasha, and then you find you can't get a charger. Or if you're in Arusha, you reach Moshi and you can't. So you have to be able to interoperate. Moving away from infrastructure, let's talk about installations. And for us here in Kenya, we all know about EPRA licensing and how they have licensed solar PV installers. We are going to, at some point, have to have standards around the people who install to ensure safety in installation, in operations, and in maintenance. So due certifications are going to be needed, and certification is the other side of standards. Let's talk about hybrid stations. At some point, we are going to be having, I believe people like Total are already going to be having stations that is still dispensing petrol and diesel and has charging points. And so for that, you're going to need standards that ensure safety, because you can have a spark just when the fuel is being unloaded. So you're going to have minimum distance standards. And I saw a comprehensive presentation on this recently in one of the UNEP forums. I believe your audience can catch up with that presentation if they haven't seen it. Of course, you have to ensure protection against electric shock, because now the fuel that is being used by an electric vehicle is power. And so for that, you need the standards, but most of that will happen at the manufacturing stage. Nico has already mentioned standards around the battery. If you're talking about 2- and 3-wheelers, you don't want any situation where there's going to be any form of leakage. And to round off my session, and away from, you've spoken about how the standards will enhance the experience of the customer. We are going to have to do billing, same as we normally do with petrol. And for this, you have to meter how much power somebody has spent, and then create a system that does the billing from the energy consumed and the amount they should pay. And for this, we need charge point protocols. And people need to be able to roam between the countries in Africa. And therefore, standards around charge point protocols and billing systems are going to make the life of the customer easier. And we need to also embrace multi-currency charge points so people can be able to roam and pay freely. Thank you, Robert.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. I think you've spoken about different and quite detailed sectors that need to be standardized. You've spoken about protection systems. I think that is one of the key areas when you talk about charging infrastructure that we need to reassure the public that once you're charging your vehicle at a particular station, that there's protection systems, that there won't be electric shocks, that there's good grounding, and basically that the whole system.
No over voltage and no over current.
Yes, and yes. Basically, and also I've loved the part where you've talked about the charging protocols. I think we've seen other countries in the EU, they've adopted the open charge point protocol. There's the issue on metering, there's the issue on payments. So all these sectors, once we marry them together, I think we can be able to kind of boost the whole ecosystem and have a seamless way of charging, of paying, and of safety. So thank you for that, Engineer Nyambala. I think we'll go on to Nico from Grotri. So I think I caught wind of the previous session where they're talking about what needs to come first, chicken and egg situation for charging and the EVs. Now I'll throw in another kind of chicken and egg situation where I'll ask you whether between standards and innovation, what should come before what? So do we need, now we all know right now we are at the growth stage, especially in Africa, we are at the growth stage of EVs. So should we wait till this technology matures for us to have this conversation on standards, or should we go in and standardize at this juncture? So Nico.
I love this question because, this also beautifully feeds into what engineer Catherine said. Well, not even what she explicitly said, but more importantly, what she implicitly said. Especially when we talk about, engineer Catherine, you talked about vehicle to grid, but at some point it will be a grid to vehicle, right? So the vehicle actually being able to, give back energy to the grid. You talked about implicitly, beautifully though, about smart metering, which is amazing. And then you implicitly talked about what happens if your vehicle or your home actually becomes the agent on the energy market. So you're not paying anything anymore, but actually your home or your car is actively getting engaged on the energy market. So what has that to do with anything? What has that to do with your question? Well, it's a fair chicken and egg problem. I would argue the more complex or the more wide-reaching the potential innovation, the more important it is that we have standards, and that's just a reality, right? Because when we talk about energy, we talk about critical infrastructure, right? Critical infrastructure is something you should not be messing around with. That is something that is key to a country to, in fact, operate. When we talk about, small scale innovations, think about electric vehicles, 2, 3-wheelers, mini mobility at large. It is nice for us to test, products fair, but the moment we start testing, we move from business model product market fit to business model market fit. We cannot understand whether we have a business model market fit if there are uncertainties around standards, uncertainties around taxation. Like there are a lot of things where we just have question marks, and we might think we have business model market fit. So what that means is being able to sustainably deliver our product to the customer, right? And all of a sudden, regulations change, and the entire business model is just completely screwed, right? So I hope that kind of gives you a good enough answer. At this particular stage, specifically the EAC is, and EAC has become somewhat of the hotbed for e-mobility on the continent. Regulations are more prevalent because we've all tested products. We are beyond product market fit for the product. Now we are literally looking at business model market fit, and that cannot be done without proper regulations in place, or at least certainty about regulations.
Thank you, Nico. That's a good point. I think Nico, coming from the private sector, I believe it's good when you can actually substantiate the work that you're doing with certain standards. So I think also we're still at that point where it's you can argue that perspective from both sides, but I think the one thing that is common in the both situations is that we need to promote e-mobility. So we just need to work hand in hand in terms of innovation. For the private sector, once they're innovating, they inform the standards bodies, and the standards bodies, once they want to standardize any component in terms of e-mobility, they get in communication with the companies. So also now back to you, Michelle. In your view, what role does standards play in addressing gaps in the e-mobility sector in Africa, if at all there are any gaps? I don't know whether in Kenya, obviously, I know you, I'm guessing you're based here in Kenya. I know in Kenya there are gaps in terms of e-mobility, but now if we look at the whole African continent, what role can these standards play in addressing the gaps that you've identified? Or if there are no gaps, I think we are good to go. Yeah, so thank you, Michelle.
Okay, thank you. So I think at this point, like we've all mentioned before, we are still at the early stages of developing e-mobility in Africa, and we can definitely say there's quite a bit of growth that is required for us to actually reach the peak and even the estimated numbers of growth of 80% by 2050 of e-mobility in Africa for two-wheelers. So in my opinion, and based on what we have seen, I would say one gap would be probably in terms of the technology. development in Africa and advancement, because this is a completely new structure that is coming in, and we are required to carry out quite a lot of research and also piloting just to understand how can these features be implemented in Africa. Because right now our reference would be from Europe, from the US, from the Asian countries, which have actually made quite a number of steps into integrating e-mobility into their systems. So I feel if we would maybe first have some local transfer of knowledge of understanding what these technologies mean for Africa and how we can apply them to our e-mobility solutions. Because we find, for example, like the two-wheelers in Africa are commercially used. And if you compare with the e-mobility, like the two-wheelers which are electric in the European countries are more of single-use base. So if we don't have technology that actually integrates our use case here in Kenya or in Africa in general, then you find that we'll find a challenge in terms of developing further and growing this sector. And also in terms of the charging infrastructure, as Catherine mentioned and Nico mentioned, this is very key, especially when it comes to the safety and the quality of even the batteries that we are going to use. So if we have specific guidelines and we can assure that, because this is not just something that is good for the sector, but also for the users and the end, they want assurance that these batteries are efficient, that they're safe to use, that they can handle the load capacity that they have. So if we don't have that kind of research and investment in charging infrastructure, and even for the safety measures of these batteries wherever they may be, then it could be quite a challenge for us and also for the end users who will actually use this mode of transport. And I believe also collaboration among different stakeholders, such as the government, private institutions, public institutions, just to further enhance our knowledge and even movement into this space. Yes, so I think for me personally, I think technology and infrastructure are very key for us to actually grow further, and use of local talent also is very necessary for us to enhance this. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That's a good overview on the gaps that you have in Africa. I'd also like to follow up that question with another question back to you at CFAO, and I think I'll move on. I'll also throw this to the company, so to the panelists who are representing companies here. So you've talked about there are gaps in terms of technological advancement and development, and piloting projects, trying to understand our market needs. So in terms of CFAO, what challenges in specific have you guys encountered in terms of technological advancement? In what particular products? And specifically, have you done any pilot projects in Kenya or anywhere else in the world? And how have the pilot project worked?
Okay, thank you, Robert, for that question. So in terms of CFAO Kenya, I'm sure you know of the Mobility 54 arm, which is part of the group, and they mainly deal with mobility solutions in Africa and fintech solutions as well. And as part of one of the investments they made into Zembo, and we've actually analyzed and seen that one of the areas that we would want to learn more and enhance further is probably the battery solutions and also the interoperability, as Catherine had mentioned. So I believe that is one factor that can be implemented and can be researched further into for us to enhance the use of these e-mobility solutions, and specifically for the two-wheeler sector, because we find that this is actually the biggest market that will grow faster even compared to the four-wheelers in Africa in general. So for us, I feel that we are still at the stage of just enhancing that type of technology, the battery systems, the interoperability, the charging infrastructure, such that it can accommodate the various use cases in Kenya and in Africa in general. So I would also not be able to go further into detail because some of the information is a bit confidential for the company, but I can say that we are taking the step in the right direction and doing our best to collaborate with different stakeholders to actually enhance solutions for Africa.
Thank you, Michelle, for that good insight. Nico, over to you. Yes. Nico?
Yes. I'm waiting for the question.
Sorry. So the question was basically how's your experience in terms of piloting projects and the gaps that had been raised by Michelle
Sorry,
in terms of
same question.
technological.
All right. Sure.
Yes.
Sorry. Well, wow. That would be a long. Let me be very brief and very specific about that. First of all, piloting has been great. There were no issues. It wasn't really so much about the piloting, because interestingly enough, we literally just wrote a letter to TBS, which is the Tanzanian equivalent to KBS, right? To ask for a PVOC exemption, because at the time when we were bringing in our prototypes, obviously, you know, there weren't standards in place. And matter of fact, there are still no standards in place, but it essentially took us like 2 days to get the confirmation letter, and you know, importing stuff was of no issue. Now the issues began when we actually tried to play according to the few regulations that are in place. The first issue was that we tried to look up the standards and try to see the details of the standards. And we came to find out that we need to actually purchase this from TBS, because TBS doesn't really publish the detailed standards, which was weird to us. Then we had to basically apply for PVOC. I hope everybody knows what a PVOC is. Let me know if I need to elaborate a bit further. So a PVOC is basically a pre-export verification of conformity, so that you are complying with the standards that are prevalent in the respective country that you want to import products into. And for Tanzania, the way it works is they have commissioned a number of independent agents, such as Bureau Veritas. I think it's the same for Kenya. So we got in touch with the Bureau Veritas office in China, because this is where we are procuring our products from. And we paid a few $1,000s to get a PVOC. And in order to get a PVOC, we had to supply a number of documents, including certification of our battery. So all in all, and I'm just going to be 100% transparent here, right? So no secrets. We paid over $25,000 for certifying our batteries, our chargers, which are CE certified, and to get a PVOC. And when we then, you know, when we had everything at the port in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, this is when everything just, you know, turned into a nightmare. TRA being on our case, TBS all of a sudden be on our case, saying, yeah, we need to, you know, go for a laboratory test on your batteries, because, you know, we don't have no standards. And we're like, guys, if that is true, then why the hell were we able to get a PVOC in the first place? You know, and we paid a few thousand USD in fines, which were completely made up. And that can really make or break a business, especially when you're a startup, you know. And now, due to the lack of standards, and TBS, we've been in touch with TBS for 2 years now. They keep on saying there's something in, you know, they have something ready, but it's almost about to get published. The issues that we are seeing, the gaps that we are seeing, is that we have a number of authorities and regulators in Tanzania, which is the TRA on the one hand, so the Tanzanian Revenue Authority, which is essential for you to register your vehicle, right? So according to the TRA system, there are already electric vehicles, so you can choose whether the combustion type is, whether the power type is a combustion engine or electric. However, the TBS does not have the supporting standards. So we need a TRA registration card in order to register our vehicle, because if we cannot register our vehicle, we would, according to the road authority, which is LATRA, technically not be allowed to deploy those vehicles, right? Meaning you don't get a license plate. We were able to get all of that. It was a huge hassle, and it was not about facilitation fee. It was really about having conversations with all of these different stakeholders, to a point where then once you finished and done that, right, you still have the traffic police, which is actually supposed to make sure that, you know, the standards are being executed on. And that is a complete Wild West situation, not to use a stronger language here, right? So sorry, it was a fairly lengthy answer. I'm emotionally quite invested in that, as you can tell. Yeah, I hope it provides a bit of context, at least for the Tanzanian perspective. Yeah,
I feel you. I really feel you, especially when you talked about that fine because of no standards, because of no kind of coordination between TRA and TBS. And I think I'll throw this over to Warren. Please, let's invite our revenue authorities in this forum so that they can understand how much these companies are suffering. Let's have all the players in the whole sector, the inspection agencies to be here. So sorry about that, Nico. I think
it's part of the game.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I believe in probably even in other African countries, there's the same kind of situation. It's only that they don't have this platform to kind of speak out. I think I needed to catch a breath there when you talked about 25,000 USD as PVOC and whatnot. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, off to the next. I think I'll kind of link some questions that I've seen here on the chat over to you, Gilbert, as you're answering that first question. There's a question here from the chat that asks, specifically to Emotion, that what kind of warranty does Emotion provide to customers for retrofit EVs? How do you deal with different responsibility between the base vehicle, electric components, fitted and assembly process? So Gilbert.
Yes. Thank you for the question. As for the warranty, we provide 2 years warranty on every component that we install on a retrofit EV. So it's 2 years warranty, and we offer a guarantee of up to 10 years for the lithium-ion batteries that we also put along with the EVs. And as another question was on safety for the right, Robert?
Yeah, the second part was, how do you deal with different responsibility between the base vehicle, electric components, fitted and assembly process? Yes. So okay.
Yes. So we have a team of experts that we are doing retrofit services for these vehicles. And one thing I would like to reiterate is that we use all the EV specific components that have high standards, component that conforms to IP67. There is no any risk that comes with the components that we are installing in these vehicles, because we know as far as how safety is concerned for the EVs. So there is no worry about that, because we use all the components that are internationally certified and appropriate for the EV standard.
Thank you for that. Let me also move to another question that I saw here before I move over. Yeah, so there's a question here. I don't know who's addressed to. It's should we drive for standards or transparency on relevant metrics? Sorry, or transparency on relevant metrics. Apart from the most fundamental safety regulations, should we avoid pass or no pass type of standard thresholds, but more visibility that allow informed decision by the users? So, Nico, I'll throw this question to you.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, right? I would think that, speaking from a private company perspective, right? I don't believe that we as a company should tell the users, yeah, you just make an educated decision, right? Yes, all the information is available, enjoy. It's great that the information needs to be available, but in the first place for the companies to know what the rules of the game are, right? And then the companies need to comply with these rules. And in addition, it's nice for customers to actually be able to do their own due diligence, right? But we shouldn't put them at front center to do the due diligence for something the companies should be required to do. That is my opinion. And I'm speaking as someone that is, you know, coming from a company perspective. I believe that some of the value that we are creating for our customers is the promise that what we are offering is actually safe to use. It is actually of quality to use, right? So.
Yeah, I think, Nico, thank you for that answer. Let me also throw in this other question. So there's a question here by Dustin that he's asking, what is the current regulatory requirement for setting up substations and charging stations for 2 and 3-wheelers in Kenya? What certifications are required from which bodies, and how confident are we that the standards in place, if any, are being followed? How and when do we expect this to change, and what body is leading this effort? So let me throw that question to Gilbert. You'll answer on behalf of Tanzania, and I think also I'll answer that on behalf of Kenya, but just a brief answer because it's the panelist session. Gilbert.
Robert?
Yes.
Can you rephrase the question, please?
Yeah, so the question is, what is the current regulatory requirement for setting up swap stations and charging stations for 2 and 3-wheelers? Oh, sorry, it was in Kenya. Sorry. Yeah, let me just, yeah, sorry. I'll answer the second bit on certifications. Let me throw this to Engineer Nyambala because you work for an organization which has set up a charging station. So what is the current regulatory requirement for setting up, let's say, a charging station?
Thank you, Robert. I think you're actually better placed, although you're a moderator today.
Okay.
For those who don't know, he's coming from the Kenya Bureau of Standards, so you're better placed. Let me just comment on 2 of the other questions before you go in with that. The question around what comes first, innovation or regulations? And Kenya is the country of M-Pesa. By the time M-Pesa was being launched, there was no regulation allowing for money transfer. So for the person who was asking, you have your answer. I see Gilbert shaking his head, yes. If we can do a serious innovation where there is no regulation, the regulation will follow. That is what we should aim for. Secondly, around the recycling, Michelle, and I'm really for us putting up in advance regulations and standards for recycling before we have enough batteries to talk about. Again, Kenya is the country of firsts in terms of thin plastic ban. I think you saw us winning an award just the other day. So I don't see why we cannot set up regulations regarding how we shall be recycling batteries and harvesting the lithium and other ions from those batteries. And so, Robert, to answer that question, innovation should also progress and regulations follow, even as we have some regulations setting the stage. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Engineer Nyambala. Okay, let me tackle this first part. So in Kenya, currently we don't have regulations for setting up the infrastructure. That is currently being worked on by the State Department of Transportation. I believe they are not yet done with the regulations. So what we are having now is what Catherine has just described, where we are having innovation kind of moving before the regulation is put forth. So, but in terms of Kenya, I don't believe that there's any hindrance towards setting up of this infrastructure. But in terms of also ensuring quality and safety of the installations, you still need to adhere to the basic principles of setting up of let me say electric installations. So that is the person who's doing the design has to be a registered engineer, a licensed engineer by IPRA, which had been previously spoken about. The components that you intend to put at KEBS will ask you for a PVOC, which Nico had mentioned, but in Kenya, I don't believe it costs that much. So that is the assurance that is given to the customers. But hopefully in the coming months in Kenya, we are to develop standards for charging infrastructure, specifically for charging stations. For battery swapping, right now it's a conversation that all over the world has not yet been finalized. That is, there's no common discussion. And because I don't want also to be a panelist and I'm a moderator, let's move to the last question that I want to pose to all the panelists. So what are the next steps that your company is intending to take in terms of e-mobility sector, and whether there's any regional presence of your company and future plans to scale up? Do you see a need of scaling up to other African countries, or whatever is being done by your company is enough as at the moment? So I think we'll start with Michelle.
Thank you, Robert, for the question. Now, in terms of our company, one thing that I believe can help Africa and even Kenya in general is collaboration among different stakeholders, because we have the regulatory bodies, we have the government who can come up with policies, and we have the companies that are actually trying to find solutions for Africa in terms of the mobility, be it retrofitting, be it importing, be it local assembly. So if there can be some synergy that develops among all these players, I believe, and our company involved, for example, I believe we can make further steps into actually enhancing e-mobility in Africa. And in terms of our presence, that is definitely growing day by day. And like we said, this is it's quite premature market in terms of e-mobility. So it's definitely this future in it, and we hope to see that eventually we have more companies coming up, more startups, and more innovation going on into technology, into charging infrastructure, and even the legislative policies, not only in Kenya but across Africa, to slowly develop to actually state the guidelines in terms of the batteries, in terms of the power sources, in terms of the safety, in regards to the end user, in regards to the infrastructure. So I believe one thing that can definitely help is the synergy among the different bodies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that. I'll move over to Gilbert.
Yes, Robert. As how Michelle stressed it, I will also stress on the same: collaborations, synergy among the stakeholders. We are here in Tanzania with Tri and other companies. We are working towards the same goal. This is the e-mobility industry, a very infant industry in the region, and we should not look at ourselves as competitors, but rather as one team working on a very same cause, that is e-mobility. So with these collaborations, I believe it will come to a point where our government will understand what the people want, will understand what the industry want. They will reach us to us. They have started reaching out to us. So we believe that the future is exciting. Let us collaborate more. And what AAMDA is doing as far as e-mobility is concerned is highly commendable. I really like this, the e-mobility week and stuff. This is to create awareness, to create more awareness to the region, to our countries. Like, this industry is here to stay. This is the future. This is the green future. So yes, collaborations. Thank you, Robert.
Let me just throw in this question as a quick one. I've seen some question. How does the cost of conversion of an ICE vehicle compare to importing an EV vehicle? So you can just finalize with that.
Yes. So far, it's still high cost, but not as compared to a new vehicle. but
Okay,
it's some cost from your pockets. But we believe that over time, with government incentives and exemptions on taxes and stuff, once they realize that e-mobility is the future, e-mobility is something that has to really happen in our countries, then the cost will go down. The cost will go down. So cost is not an issue. An issue is the goal. If you want to attain an e-mobility, future green generation.
Gilbert?
The cost will go down with the right support from our governments.
Okay, over to you, Engineer Nyambala.
Thank you, Robert. Exciting conversation. I want to combine standards, certifications, licensing, and protocols. Very quickly, 4 things. The first one, standards regulations around adequate power. As we continue increasing in e-mobility, we're going to need enough power to, and I'm talking about grid stability here, not just the power, but when people put the equipment to charge, do we have enough power to respond in terms of frequency control? Number 2, I already spoke about it, least cost. We want the lowest tariffs across Africa. So we need to work together to ensure the tariffs are the lowest and we are using green energy. Number 3, certification, capacity building of all the people who will be participating in this market. We already have a World Bank sponsored skills transformation project in this country around energy, and we want to ensure that we build the capacity of all the players to be able to play with confidence and license above. And the last one is on the carbon emission reduction. Across Africa, we should partner and work together to ensure that we have some protocols that ensure that all our projects are eligible, either for green financing or for claiming on the emission reduction credits. And for that, we need to collaborate, we need to develop protocols, we need to innovate around that. If you have a small project such as Gilbert's and you are able to transform 100 vehicles, we should link you up into a pool where you can claim the credits for that transition. Thank you, Robert, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Catherine. I think, Warren, you've gotten that point on capacity building. That is an area where IMDA can greatly contribute. So finally, Nico, wrap it up with that question on the next steps.
I mean, look, we are investor based, so obviously we need to scale. So that goes far beyond the Tanzanian borders. So that's the game plan for the next 12 to 24 months, and happy to keep you posted. But yes, absolutely, we're gonna scale. I mean, it's inevitable, right?
Nice. So thank you all for being part of this session and giving great contributions to this session on the e-mobility week, and actually answering these questions that everyone wants to understand, and actually contributing to how standards can promote quality and safety in e-mobility. So over to you, Warren.
Thank you, Robert. This was a very exciting session. As always, we are always cut short by time, but I'm sure we'll now take in the feedback. I think we need more of such conversations. We should be sharing these experiences so that maybe other companies can find ways of, increasing the efficiency, seeing the actual need in the market. We also need a lot more participation, especially from the public sector, so that these are the people we depend on to action some of the policy work, and they should also be part of this to understand what the industry is really facing. Thank you all for the really good insights that you provided, as well as real life experiences. Our next session will be happening in a couple of hours, not immediately though. Let me just get that poster. So in a couple of hours, we'll be talking about gender equality and social inclusion in the e-mobility ecosystem. Again, just to cast a light on what's going on matters inclusion. So we have a great lineup for you this afternoon. You may take a break and we can meet up shortly afterwards. Another reminder is in case you're in Nairobi, we're having an e-mobility expo happening on 29th, which is this week on Saturday from 9 o'clock to 4 p.m. Come and test the electric vehicles that we've been seeing or hearing about. Electric cars, bicycles, buses, motorbikes, they'll all be there. So we look forward to seeing you there, and let's catch up in 2 hours' time. So thanks again to the partners who are greatly supporting this event. We'll close the session in the next 3 minutes, just so that you can wrap up any conversations in the chat section. Feel free to hang on and connect. But it's been really amazing. Just a quick question, to Nico, to Gilbert, are you already deploying vehicles on the road? Can people reach out to you in case people want to start buying some of these products?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Warren.
Great.
Yes, Warren. We at eMotion Africa already have deployed more than 15 vehicles so far. So we and these vehicles are working in one of our national parks, that is the Serengeti. So I'm inviting other people who would like to collaborate, who would like to learn about our product and services, to reach out to me or to us, and yeah, we will discuss it and take it from there.
Well, in case you need to get in touch with Nico or Gilbert, feel free to contact them or reach out to the African Mobility Week and we'll surely make an intro. Thanks again. Have a good afternoon.
You too, guys. Bye.